Chapter 5. In the grand scheme of things, my kidnapping didn't last much longer than a day, and in some ways it wasn't a large thing. However, the trauma was a much larger thing, and I don't think my family has ever recovered from it. Mother and my brother found themselves having nightmares. Father seemed to withdraw from socializing with his neighbors and friends as much, and I found myself irrationally afraid of men I didn't know. Even having a good idea of what was going on in my head, knowing that didn't make it go away. I took up meditation, which I remembered from my last life, even if I hadn't practiced it then, and taught my family to do it as well. It helped a little bit, but there was no magic cure. We just had to live with the memories, and the effect they had on us. A year later, Calvin went through his awakening ceremony and received militiaman as his class, determined to become a guardsman instead of serving house fellows like our father did. He had apologized to me endlessly, and I never could convince him that I forgave him. And I absolutely had forgiven him, although I didn't think of it as his fault in the first place. He was a mere 9 years old. While he had no choice but to have responsibility because the medieval world didn't have the concept of proper working hours. There was no one else to look after me, and our parents had to work. And there was nothing that could have stopped this kidnapping. If they hadn't grabbed me, they would have taken him. And, as far as I was concerned, I was the better choice. It had been 7 years since then, and Calvin had evolved his class into guardsman. He had moved out and into his own home, and a girl he had grown up with was looking more and more like she would become his fiancée. From a gangly kid who was left in the dust by a rogue, he had turned into a tall and muscled young man, who had skills that would allow him to chase a criminal tirelessly and relentlessly. I was told that our classes and skills depended on our most important parts of our lives. I never said anything, but I knew that his skill was the result of his memory of failing to catch my kidnapper festering in him. I was proud of my brother though. As sad as that was, he had turned it into his own strength and was a rising star in the city guard. Our family was doing very well, and I think there was no better evidence for this than today. Because today was my awakening ceremony, and the entire family plus Caroline, my brother's girlfriend, was here to watch. We all had shoes, boots in my brother's case, and were dressed cleanly although not richly. The awakening ceremony took place in a large cathedral near the city center, and while most of Verdun was not impressive to someone with a modern eye, the cathedral took my breath away. A towering and gigantic white marble building with large stained glass windows depicting the gods and ancient heroes. It was covered in detailed carvings both outside and inside, with massive paintings on the ceiling illuminated by massive chandeliers that held magical lights. Even the floor was artful, with scenes depicted in mosaic throughout the entire building. Of course, we weren't allowed to loiter long in the main hall and were shepherded off to a side room by a priest soon enough. Before my kidnapping, I was too young to go anywhere. After my kidnapping, my family's fear and my own fear kept me from ever wandering far. So I was something of a sheltered child, and most of the things my parents and brother talked about I had not seen myself. Today, I got my first taste of the inherent classism and classism of my new society. Outside the cathedral I had seen a line of people that had been stopped by the temple guard. Serfs, or free people too poor to have shoes and nice enough clothes, were stopped from entering the main doors. They had to wait and were allowed to enter only through a side door. The temple guard had merely given my family and I a look over without bothering to stop us from walking up to the main doors. Another family had entered before us, equally well dressed, but I saw an acolyte showing them to another side room where they could wait for a priest. Despite them arriving sooner, we were to be seen first, and it was probably because the priest class was able to see the class of other people, and my parents had evolved their classes. Mother was now a senior maid, and while she didn't like how it made her sound old, it was a very good class for a commoner woman to have. Most people failed to evolve their class unless they had some kind of apprentice class like apprentice blacksmith or militiaman. Class evolution, even in a servant-type class, was considered proof of a superior individual. Having a senior maid was a point of pride for the nobility, and Mother now often attended nobles who visited house fellows as a way for house fellows to show off. Father, on the other hand, had gotten the class faithful servant, which had catapulted him to working as a personal servant to Lord Felius himself. A faithful servant could be trusted with even the most sensitive tasks and performed them well, making him incredibly valuable to Lord Felius. And, of course, Calvin was a guardsman, which was considered a very respectable class for a commoner. Caroline was an apprentice seamstress, but considering my parents and brother, that didn't matter. As a group, we simply had superior classes, and so we were treated better. Of course, our treatment wasn't the best by a long shot. There was a reason we were hurried out of the main hall. A free person could get a glimpse, but no one wanted us to actually hang around when actual important people might come through. Nobles didn't even come down to the cathedral, instead they hired a priest to tutor and awaken their children from their manners. Wealthy merchants and those who were expert at their trades would pay to send their children to the cathedral to be taught by the priest, giving them a leg up in their awakening and more of an understanding about how to get skills and evolve their class. Essentially, we had just enough status to not be treated like scum. Greetings and welcome, the priest smiled at us. You are here for an awakening ceremony? Yes, your grace, Father gave a light bow. Our daughter has turned 10 today, and we seek the guidance of the gods. Of course, of course. Come forward, young Honora, I am Riveri, a priest of Exathan. Today is an important day, the most important day of your life. Choose carefully, and choose slowly. Do not be afraid to ask and talk to myself or your parents, this will determine the path of your life. No pressure, right? At the very least, I didn't need to be afraid of Riveri because his ability to pull my name out of thin air was proof of his class. I was still afraid, but I stepped forward anyway. Riveri held out his hand and an orb of light formed, floating off his palm to hang in the air in front of me. I took a breath, stretched out my hand and touched the orb. Suddenly, my menu was visible to everyone for the first time, but with a bit of an addition. Character menu, name, Honora, daughter of Velvet, age, 10. Class. Level. Statistics, strength, 46. Endurance, 43. Vitality, 53. Agility, 61. Dexterity, 55. Perception, 101. Acuity, 64. Willpower, 52. Charisma, 64. Magic, 50. Luck, 87. Abilities. First words, Incarnator skill, hidden, better first impression, Incarnator skill, hidden. Congratulations! You were able to awaken and choose a class. Available class list, choose wisely. Commoner, common, the basic class of a free person. Commoners have few things they are exceptional at, but they have flexible skills. Even a normal person can do more than what people would believe. Cleaner, common, you clean, and you are good at it. The cleaner class will make you better at it. No dirt or stain can resist you and you clean quickly and easily. This class is considered an apprentice-type class and can more easily evolve. Apprentice seamstress, common, you might not be good at it yet, but you have a talent for sewing. A few more prick fingers and you might be able to do more. This class is considered an apprentice-type class and can more easily evolve. Laborer, common, there is always a need for someone to lift heavy things, and that is where you come in. A strong back and the will to use it is all you need to get through life. Apprentice dancer, common, so you might be crushing a few toes right now, but they didn't need those anyways, right? You need to move, and you want to do it beautifully one day. This class is considered an apprentice-type class and can more easily evolve. Apprentice singer, common, most people can't carry a tune with a bucket, but you can. Eventually, you might even learn how to sing without people covering their ears and running away. This class is considered an apprentice-type class and can more easily evolve. Thief, uncommon, the easiest way to own something is often just to take it, and you see no reason why you should mess with that formula. This class will help you move unseen and remain unnoticed while committing theft. Maid, uncommon, you can clean the floor, serve a visitor tea, set the dinner table, dust a dozen rooms, and refresh your employer's drink all at the same time. A maid can do many things, and do them well. The ultimate housekeeper, this class will make it possible to do the impossible when it comes to cleaning and service. Assassin, rare. Sometimes, someone needs someone dead. Sometimes, they need them dead quietly or to die in a certain way to send a message to certain someones. Sometimes someone might be willing to pay for someone to do that service. The assassin class will help you remain unseen, move quickly, and strike powerfully for the kill. Battle maid, rare. The battle maid is equal parts housekeeper and bodyguard, ensuring both the safety and comfort of their ward against any and all threats. A maid can clean. A battle maid can clean up bodies. As a hybrid class, a battle maid is not as powerful in combat as other rare combat classes, but they still retain the cleaning and serving capabilities of a rare maid class. That is quite the list, Honora. The priest's eyebrows rose as he read my options. Although I confess I am a little worried by seeing thief and assassin, you should be careful about the life you live to keep dark classes away. You have two rare classes available. My brother was odd, his mouth open as he stared at my menu. I can't believe it. Mother and father seemed stunned too. They had told me before that chances are I would have won uncommon class, and that only because mother had worked hard to teach me the duties of a maid before I had this ceremony. Having a rare class was beyond the wildest dreams of a lower-class child like myself. A child of a rich merchant or of a noble might of a rare class, but for me to have two options? I know you told me to choose carefully, Monsignor Riveri, but I think that there is really only one option for me here. I spoke while my family was recovering from their shock. I choose battle maid. You have chosen a class. You are now a battle maid. You have reached level 1. You have gained the ability a maid's discipline. You have gained the ability alchemical intuition. You have gained the ability chemical intuition. You have gained the skill improved cleaning. You have gained the skill work is never done. You have gained the skill elegant movements. You have gained the skill made sense. You have gained the skill danger sense. You have gained the skill weapon proficiency, short blades. You have gained the skill menu camouflage. You have gained the skill burst of speed. Monsignor Riveri, would you mind if I asked you what the difference is between an ability and a skill? I ask as I am assaulted with a deluge of information. I'll have to check what my new skills do later. I hadn't expected to get so many, but then, I hadn't expected a rare class. The priest hummed as he watched my notifications with interest. Abilities are exclusive to certain classes and cannot be learned otherwise. In truth, they are much like class skills, except they are often far more restricted. I am sorry, sir, what is a class skill? Ah, excuse me. Riveri tore his eyes away from my menu and turned to me again. Now that you have a class you can gain 3 things: general skills, class skills, and abilities. Anyone, in any class, can learn a general skill if they put the effort in to do so, whereas class skills can only be learned by specific classes. Abilities, on the other hand, are not learned by the individual but granted by the class. Every, battle maid that you meet will have the ability chemical intuition, for example. However, they might not have the class skill burst of speed, and you could find a commoner with a general skill improved cleaning. Thank you very much for your instruction, I say as I remove my hand from the orb and my menu fades. I curtsy to the priest and ask, is there anything else I need to do? No, the ceremony is complete. Congratulations, it is always wonderful to see a rare class so young. Riveri says as he moves to leave before he turns back saying with a laugh, be a good girl and help your parents get outside, will you? The shock seems to have overwhelmed them. That comment snaps them out of their daze, and my family begins making bows and curtsies towards the priest, but he has already left. Mother pulls me outside quickly, not even slowing down to admire the incredible cathedral hall as we leave. When we were finally outside, my mother squealed in joy. She picked me up and spun me around like she had when I was a little baby. "I can't believe it, I can't believe it, I can't believe it," she shouted, not caring at all that we were attracting attention. My father was smiling like a fool and my brother started thumping me on the back as soon as mother set me down on the ground. Oh God, there were entire crowds staring at us. I hadn't really been in crowds for a decade. How do I handle this? "Mother, please stop," I mumbled as I tried to hide my face. "I am embarrassed. My dearest daughter gets a rare as her first class and you expect me not to shout it to the high heavens?" Mother laughs out loud. Today the gods smile upon us more than ever. "That's right, Anne," Calvin joins in with a smile. "Plus, it is partially a fighting class, so we don't need to worry about you so much anymore. She still has a lot of leveling and growing to do before I will stop worrying," Father interjected, but he also had a smile on his face. Honestly, as a father I am not sure I will ever stop worrying, but it is a good start. I hope he does stop worrying. I have barely explored this world and I am honestly going a little stir-crazy at home. Of course, despite the current celebration, it wasn't like I would have much free time after this. No, our next stop would be the manor of House Felius, to talk to the head maid. On the way, I checked my new skills and abilities. Alchemical intuition and chemical intuition weren't very interesting. The short version was that I could detect poisons mundane or magical. Which sounds useful, if not very interesting. A maid's discipline was more interesting, but honestly I found what it did to be a little disturbing. As long as I was working, or fighting, I could ignore injury and exhaustion, although I would eventually collapse if I kept pushing myself. It seemed a bit dangerous to me. Improved cleaning, elegant movements, danger sense, and weapon proficiency, short blades, did exactly what it says on the tin. Even now, I could feel the difference as we walked. I walked into the cathedral, and then it seemed like I glided out because my movements were so graceful. No, the ones I were interested in, work is never done, made sense, menu camouflage, and burst of speed. The first of which, work is never done, complemented a maid's discipline well. The skill gave me a boost of energy and even health whenever I completed a task. It sounded so amazing I had to read it twice to make sure I had it correct. It was a workaholic's dream, not that I was one. Made sense was like danger sense but for maid-related things. It basically allowed me to sense dirty and unclean things, and I am honestly not mature enough to promise that I won't use it to make jokes about my brother later. It also let me know if my employer wanted food or drink, or even if they were uncomfortable. It would be very useful in my new job. Menu camouflage was also pretty interesting. Basically, any class that could use some kind of an examination skill would see me not as a battle maid, but as a personal maid. However, it didn't work on my employer and it also only worked on people who were less than 5 levels above me, so it wasn't very useful yet. Finally, burst of speed was basically bullet time. I could spend my energy, which I wish I had a stat for on my menu, to increase my personal speed and slow my perception of time. Which was pretty neat, but based on the name I guessed it wouldn't allow me to become the Flash or anything like that. We used the servant's entrance to the manor and soon I was talking to the head maid, a severe-looking older woman. However, she greeted mother and father with a warm smile and was happy to hire me. However, it turned out she had some kind of skill that allowed her to see the classes of the workers under her. Which was how I once again found myself in front of Lord Felius. Well, he seemed amused as he leaned back in his seat. We were in his study, and he was sitting behind an ornate desk. Behind him was a large window looking out over Britain. Little Honora, has it been so long already? Don't get old, the years always seem to slip away. I am at your service, my lord. My curtsy seems to amuse him even more. I can see that your awakening ceremony was blessed. That isn't just a rare class, but it is also a rare one. He chuckled as he saw the confusion on my parents' and my own face. Some classes might be rare, but you can always just throw money at people and make those classes appear. Other classes are a little more tricky, and Battle Maid is one of them. It is odd to find an assassin who wants to be a maid or a maid who wants to be an assassin. I'm not surprised that the Baron already knew about my class. More surprisingly, he remembered about his idea from years ago to assign me to his daughter. The plot to poison his family hadn't been the end of the intrigue that he had been involved in, and my class was absolutely perfect for me to become his daughter's attendant. But that would be tomorrow. Today I was going to explore. Chapter 6. Verdun is larger than I thought it would be. I suppose, prior to now, I hadn't really thought about it much, but the image I had in my head of medieval cities was much smaller than this. Of course, I say that like I have even seen a fraction of the city. We've just walked down a street. Verdun's main street, which was, to my great delight, paved with cobblestones. True, but that is at least something. Finally, I was free of our home. For a certain value of free, anyway. Father had me hold his hand the entire time. I can't complain that much, because I am only 10 years old. Still, there are other children running around all over the place, or helping at their parents' stalls. The city had many different market areas apparently, but the greatest of which was along the main road that connected the ducal palace to the outer gate. House Felius's manor was, as one might expect, close to the palace, and so it was only a short walk to the main street. My first shock was the sheer amount of people that there were around. Crowds of people, divided only by the passing of cattle-drawn carts or horse-pulled carriages. Some buying, some selling, some straight-up stealing, but all of them moving about and making noise. It was loud, and the less that was said about the smell, the better. On the other hand, hey, what do they sell there? I point to a shop with large, clear glass windows displaying items of various kinds, that were glowing. Is it magic? Maybe, Father says as he sees what I am pointing at. But that isn't the kind of place we shop at. We can't even go in and look. I mean, I haven't actually gotten to see any magic yet. Minus Mother's cleaning skills, which I still think are magic. No, Annie, Mother says, it isn't for us. I wanted to look, but there wasn't any point in behaving like a child even if I was one. However, for a fantasy world it is a shame not to be able to actually see the most fantastical elements in it. Although, if I pay attention, I can see examples all around me. The class and skill system is a fascinating thing to see in action. I saw a thief appear, seemingly out of thin air, when my brother grabbed him, and then somehow escape from my brother's grip and disappear into the crowd in barely enough time for me to blink. I'd chase him if I was on duty, my brother grumbled and spat off to the side. But there is always another one. You'd be amazed how many people have criminal classes. That was just one example though. I saw merchants using skills to haggle or to display their goods. I saw messengers slip through gaps in the crowd that were certainly too small for them as they ran at full sprint. A laborer off on the side of the road picked up a giant crate without any visible effort and carried it effortlessly. Wow, this is amazing! I shouted, practically jumping with excitement. How does everyone even manage to live here? My family just laughed as I gawked all around me. Come on, Annie, Father said as he chuckled. We are almost there. Almost where? I asked curiously. I had just wanted to see outside of my home for once. Are we going somewhere? You don't think we wouldn't celebrate your awakening ceremony, did you? Mother chided gently. I have felt terrible about keeping you at home for so long. I'm sure you've been lonely, so I really wanted to make this day special for you. Mother and Father guided me towards, instead of a stall like I expected, a shop, with glass windows and everything. The wooden entrance was decorated and the building was wholly made out of quality stone. When I saw it, I instinctively slowed down. But, can't we go in there? I asked hesitantly, but Mother encouraged me. We won't be there long, and today is a special occasion. A bell rang as we opened the door, and we entered the cool interior. Actually, it was almost cold inside. But despite that there were well-dressed couples and individuals at small tables inside. It kind of reminded me of a bar in the way it was set up, but it lacked that atmosphere. Of course, it had been over a decade now since I had bluffed my way into a bar with a fake ID, but I had been in enough to tell the difference. The looks we were getting weren't exactly approving, but Father confidently walked up to the counter with me in hand and spoke to one of the attendants. "Hello there," Father spoke first, and with a smile, "I was hoping to purchase a cup to celebrate my daughter's fortune in her awakening today." The attendant hadn't been precisely hostile before, but after Father said that, his face softened into a definitely welcoming smile as he said, "Well, congratulations, young lady, you have certainly come to the right place. What do you sell here?" I asked curiously, as I watched Father hand the attendant several silver. "That is so much money. They normally buy food and clothes with copper coins." Father had just handed over 2 months' worth of both my parents' income to the other man. "This," the man says with pride as he hands over. "Oh my God, it is ice cream. A small bowl of ice cream. A treat I never imagined I would see in this world." With shaking hands and wide eyes, I reached out to take the bowl and then to take a taste. The cold sweetness of real ice cream entered my mouth, and it was an explosion of flavor compared to the bland food I usually ate. It tastes so good. I am nearly moaning in delight, and I have to force myself not to just shove the entire bowl in my mouth at once. Seeing my parents' smiles at my joy made me feel ashamed though. After they had spent so much, I had not offered them a bite, and there was part of me that didn't want to. Still, I held the bowl out and opened my mouth to offer, only for Calvin to cut me off. "Any other day I'd steal that from you myself," he said with a grin. "But it isn't every day you awaken to a rare class, so just enjoy it." I swore to myself that I would make enough money one day that we could enter an ice cream shop whenever we wanted and buy enough for all of us. But for now, I just ate my ice cream and enjoyed the day. Here is hoping that tomorrow is even half as good. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. I am in hell. Podius Satan, and this whole incarnation business is obviously an illusion to give me false hope and then yank it away. I had thought that the head maid only looked severe and was actually nice because she had greeted Mother and Father so kindly. I could not have been more wrong if I had tried. If Pody was Satan, then Agnes the head maid was a demon he created just to ram a pitchfork into my backside. "If you think awakening to a rare class will make this easy for you," she had said on my first day, "then you are wrong. The gods might gift you some skills with your class, but the rest you have to earn on your own, and a good maid has many skills." After that, Agnes gave me a look that brooked no compromise and said in a voice as cold and implacable as a glacier that it should go without saying that she only hired good maids. What followed was a training regimen that I would hesitate to demand a Marine go through. The closest thing I had to a break was when I would shadow one of the maids who were serving Catherine Felius, who I would be assigned to in the future. That was 2 hours out of my day, and while I said shadowing, it was more accurate to say the work was split between me and the maid I shadowed. Most of the rest of the day was spent under the brutal thumb of the head maid. Clean that floor, set the table, dust the chandelier, take the laundry to the wash, and then wash that laundry. And of course, only the very best would do. God have mercy if the silver wasn't polished when I set the table, or if the floor didn't shine like the sun when I was finished cleaning it, because Agnes had none. This country didn't really have the concept of human rights, let alone worker rights. Instead, their line of thought went something like this: if you didn't want to get switched by the head maid, then you should have moved faster, shouldn't you have? At this point, I think I am more afraid of the head maid's switch than I am of death itself. However painful my death might be, at least I would escape the head maid. The last 2 hours of daylight were spent with the Baron's knights, being trained to fight. The first thing I learned from the knights was the chivalry really only applied to the nobility. Commoner women didn't really merit the same respect, which was saying something because a noble lady was often treated like a trophy or ornament for her lord husband. Rough treatment and rude calls to return when I was a bit older for some real training was basically the best it got. The only good thing I can say about the experience is that the one man who did leer at me ended up drawing the ire of the rest. The Knights were assholes, not pedophiles, and despite their incredibly rude and offensive jokes they did not take kindly to the real thing. That man disappeared, and I'm not sure what happened to him. I am even less sure that anybody will ever go looking for him, much less find out what actually happened. Good riddance to bad rubbish. Still, every night I found myself in tears at home. Mother would try to calm me and soothe me, but she never suggested that I stop. No, from her point of view, from this world's point of view, this training was not a punishment but a privilege. The chance to earn so many new skills was something to celebrate. Even if the head maid and the night captain would push me harder than anyone else just because I had awoken to a rare class. I had taken to using burst of speed just to complete my cleaning duties and relying on work is never done to keep me from falling over. But, I did gain skills. I gained a lot of them actually. Expert cleaning, improved laundry, improved sewing, instinctive etiquette, improved cooking, improved makeup application, improved styling, improved gardening, enhanced stamina, enhanced recovery, stealth, detect poison, enhanced dodge, improved footwork, improved throwing, accurate strikes, lightning strikes, and counter-assassin were the easy ones. The last two I learned made me question whether this job was even worth taking at all. I don't think I am comfortable with this. I did not even try to hide the unease in my voice. Is it really necessary? Because I can't say that I would have taken this job if I had known this was part of it. We have a healer standing by the whole time, the nondescript man assures me as he straps my wrists down. You will be in no danger. I can honestly tell you that death scares me far less than this does. I say, although it is a bit too late to back out now when I'm already strapped in. At this point I can't help but wonder what kind of maniac would go into a trade that involved teaching skills like this. Behind that nondescript face is quite possibly a very functional monster in human flesh. Interesting, he says with all the enthusiasm of a man resigned to oblivion. My skills tell me that you aren't lying. Would it help you to know that your future ward went through the same procedure 2 years ago? I was stunned. I was 12 years old now, and Catherine Felius was the same age as me. The procedure I was going through today was to earn the skill pain resistance, and it involved being strapped to this table in my small clothes and then being tortured until I gained it. And they had done this to Catherine at 10 years old. But, she is just a kid. I say, which probably sounds ridiculous coming from my mouth as I am in the body of a 12-year-old. The torturer nods however, taking my words completely seriously. Oh yes, he says as he pulls out various tools, my heart rate spiking up as he lays them all out. It is standard practice among the nobility to have the newly awakened learn their resistance skills as soon as possible so that they have them in the event they are ever captured by an enemy. Now, my perception is unfortunately high, and I find young girls' voices to be rather shrill, the torturer says as he pulls out a gag. We will be here for quite a while before you even have a chance of learning pain resistance, so I am going to spare my ears from the first part of it. It wasn't until a little over 6 hours later that I got a notification saying that I had gained pain resistance and the pain. Well, it didn't go away, I just suddenly found that I could ignore it. My throat was raw and my voice hoarse when I finally stopped screaming uncontrollably and the torturer had smiled and said, "Congratulations on your new skill," and released me like nothing had happened. I fled the room. I used burst of speed all the way home and hid under the sheets weeping until Mother came home. I clung to her and cried and cried and cried. Not because of pain, but out of sheer terror. What made it worse was that the man had just kept talking during the whole thing, ignoring my cries and begging whenever he removed the gag and simply prattled on about his class and skills. He told me about the skills he wasn't using, and how that pain resistance really only delayed the inevitable anyways. There were ways around it and everyone broke eventually, which made the whole thing so much worse, because if it didn't work then what was the point of going through it all? Even today, I still have nightmares about being on that table and wake up screaming. I met the torturer again to learn one other skill, poison resistance, and merely seeing his face had caused me to end up cowering in a corner of the room until father was called over to coax me back to my feet. The experience was just as bad as learning pain resistance was. I was fed poison after poison of all kinds. Some painless, while others left me on the floor, begging them to just let me die. While generally not as bad as the torture was, it took me a week to gain the poison resistance skill, and I was poisoned the whole time, even while I slept. Why did I put up with this? After all, I was a free person, and I could leave if I so chose. I didn't have to endure this, I could work for someone else. However, the class that I was so proud of turned out to be a trap in this regard. Anywhere that I would go would see that I was a battle maid and want to use me as such, and that meant having a certain set of skills. Conversely, if I tried to work at a different job, I would likely be unable to gain the skills I would need to compete with other workers, so there was no point in hiring me when they could hire someone with a specialized class. The only job that I could certainly get is the one job any woman with any class could get, and I decided to take the pain and poison instead. That wasn't the only reason for my decision to stay though. The other reason was that I had grown to like Catherine Felius herself. Lady Felius was a bright girl and a model lady, educated in poetry and the arts and with a talent for both. By the age of 15, I was truly her maid, and my training was done, so I was with her from dawn until dusk. In public, I was ever her loyal maid, unseen and unobtrusive, yet always there to provide anything she needed and always watchful for any threat. In private, she would sometimes draw me into conversations about philosophies and ideas from my old world. Of course, I was hardly an expert on any of them, but in this world I might very well be the first person to even mention the basics of some of these ideas, so it didn't matter that I was more simplistic than I could have been. Surprisingly, I think I enjoyed being a maid. As a modern woman, I wouldn't have thought I would have, but then, this life is hardly what I would have imagined then. For one thing, with expert cleaning, burst of speed, work is never done, elegant movements, improved stamina, and improved recovery, I could walk into a dining hall after a feast for 100 people, with the mess still on the table and floor and even the ceiling, and walk out 5 minutes later with the place looking spotless and not even be winded. With the skills I had, my job was mostly free time, and because Catherine had yet to debut in public, that essentially meant that I got to spend all day talking, reading poetry, and admiring art with a good friend. However, that debut was coming soon, and the society around us was starting to show some cracks. Chapter 7 Catherine Felius Poff. Focusing on my breathing became easier after Anne taught me the meditation skill. It helped to calm my nerves and keep me focused as I sat in front of the mirror. A proper lady sat calmly and did not twitch or fidget, even when they were in private with their personal servants. It was just that doing nothing was so hard. My debut at Summer Solstice Ball was in an hour, and there was nothing I could do to prepare for it. Which wasn't to say I wasn't being prepared. Anne was buzzing around behind me like a particularly busy hummingbird. She was arranging my hair, applying my makeup, and giving me something called a manicure, seemingly all at the same time. Dad had introduced me to her as my personal maid and bodyguard, but Anne wasn't a personal maid or a bodyguard, but a battle maid and my only friend. "Perhaps you might make some friends tonight," Anne said, stopping long enough for me to see her smile before she blurred again. "You don't need to worry, you are a vision of loveliness even without me, but after I finish they will fall to their knees when they see you." I appreciated Anne trying to encourage me, but it didn't help the pit in my stomach. I loved Anne, she was like the sister I never had, but she had no sense for politics at all. While she could talk a surprising amount about philosophy considering the status of her birth, none of it seemed to translate over to the practical side of things. The way life should be and the way people should behave for society to be as good as possible is not the way things actually are. I ponder this as Anne stands me up and begins working on the ties for my corset. Mom and Dad warned me about the increasing infighting at the Duke's court, and that it was merely mirroring what was happening at the King's court in Versailles. Verdun, and my parents' territory, had been mostly unaffected by the droughts in the southwest, but that hadn't stopped the economic ripples from reaching all the way to the northeast of the country. The skirmishes with Iberia and those same southern territories had left them near bankrupt a decade ago, and royalist nobles in the northwest and northeast had pitched in large amounts of coin to help rebuild the region. Then the droughts hit, and the investment evaporated like the region's streams. Suddenly, many royalists were bankrupt and the noble factions were ascendant. It had thrown the kingdom into chaos and everyone was scrambling for an advantage, and House Felius was no exception. And, perfect. Anne roused me from my musings as she guided me in front of the full-body mirror. I could barely recognize myself, but I was used to that with Anne. "Anne, there are nobles that would kill for a skill like that," I sighed, and the beautiful doll in the mirror copied me. "I would be lost without you." "Nonsense." Anne laughed, but she looked proud nonetheless. "If we switched clothes you would still turn heads, my lady, and it really isn't so much a skill as it is just skill." The girl in the mirror, soon to be a young lady, was stunning in her red and pink dress, mostly in red, to suggest maturity but with enough pink to remind of her youth, her face pale except for slightly rosy cheek and ruby red lips. If you look closer at her face, you'd find more makeup skillfully and tastefully used. Her eyelashes were long and she had eyeliner that made her green eyes pop out and seem to sparkle. Her long blonde hair had been worked into a mix of braids and ringlets. With a crown braid on top below that her straight hair was curled into soft waves that flowed down her back. The crown braid had a small amount of rubies and diamonds braided into it so that her hair sparkled whenever she walked. And this girl in the mirror was me. I looked less like a noble or a lady and more like a princess, and all because Anne had an eye for fashion that seemed to be far ahead of the current trends. Her use of jewelry was inspired, and thankfully for my dear dad, far cheaper than the current trends. Where gigantic jewels and large pieces were the current rage, Anne had scoffed at such things. "The purpose of jewelry is to show off the lady," Anne had said. "It is not the purpose of the lady to show off the jewelry. You should shine and always be the center of attention, not a rock." A knock at the door and Anne flit from my sight to the door to welcome my dad in, and I saw him in the mirror and I turned to greet him. "Look at you, my dear cat," he smiled widely as he saw me. "You look absolutely stunning, no one will be able to take their eyes off you tonight. If only your mother were here to see this." "Thank you, Dad," I smiled. "Honestly, it doesn't even feel real to me yet. I am somewhat in a blur right now. If I know you, my dear, you will not just be fine, you will be the star of the night." Cadence leap off as on aura. If I had been in Cat's place, I would have been a nervous wreck, not least because corsets are horrible torture devices, but also because her debut is far more important than I would have thought years ago. A debut was not merely an introduction to society, but the event that would evolve her class from noble to lady. Plus, the current political atmosphere was starting to look like Game of Thrones, just with less blood. Less blood so far, anyway. Honestly, it wasn't so much that I didn't understand the politics of the situation, despite what Kat might think, as it was that I understood it too well. I wasn't a particularly avid student of history, but I wasn't an idiot. Anyone who has made it through my old world's education system could tell you how this story will go. Skirmishes and droughts in a feudal society? The southern territories will inevitably have a famine. While the lords and ladies plot and play games of politics, marriage, and debt, the famine will weaken the immune systems of the people in those territories and disease will spread. Disease and hunger will cause the population to flee, spreading disease further. The population will collapse and the nobles, already in debt to the north, will be even more unable to pay their debts back. Without money, their military forces will weaken. They will have less soldiers with less training and lesser arms and armor. Their forts and walls will decay from lack of upkeep. Granaries to feed armies and guards will be empty. What happens then? The neighboring countries to the south will scent blood in the water and invade. Of course, being a feudal country themselves, that would overextend Iberia as the new territories would be too far from the central authority to control and therefore, too costly and dangerous to garrison an arm long-term. And so they would be taken back and skirmishing would begin again, until the next opportunity presented itself. Of course, the ultimate solution to this is a strong central government with competent ministers and minimal corruption, which was basically the exact opposite of feudalism. With the resurgence of the noble faction, that had absolutely no chance of happening anytime soon. This was mostly academic though. House Felius was a baron family. It was easier to count from the bottom of society than the top to find their rank. They might hope to leverage the current instability into becoming viscounts, but the overall political situation would be led by the royal family, the dukes, and coalitions of counts. House Felius simply have to do its best to weather the storm in the future. Now, however, was not time for political musings. I, as a servant, don't get to ride in the carriage along with Cat and Lord Felius. Instead, I am sitting next to the driver as we approach the ducal palace. The palace alone is a powerful demonstration of the difference in wealth and power between a duke and a baron. House Felius was wealthy, obscenely wealthy compared to the commoners, but their manor was roughly what you would expect from a medieval manor. Which is to say, the average college apartment in my old world had a greater level of comfort and luxury than the manor had. It was not overtly magical, even if the staff were skillful. The ducal palace by contrast, shone with magic. Quite literally in fact, as it made use of magical lights of multiple colors and the architecture was made of sweeping delicate arches and towers with massive glass windows. It looked like something Disney might have built with modern technology, and seeing it up close brought me my first feelings of awe in this world. The grand entrance, lit by floating orbs of light in the dusk, was a path of white marble inlaid with designs, running straight through gardens to the manor and flanked by guards in the duke's livery. The doors of the entrance itself were thrown open, bathing the area in light and music. The driver had produced an invitation to show the guards and we pulled up to that fantastical path. I used burst of speed to appear by the carriage door, opening it for Lord Felius and Cat and bowing as Lord Felius stepped out, and then held his hand out to help Cat down from the carriage. They would walk into the main entrance, but as a mere personal maid, as far as anyone who checked my menu could see anyway, there was no way that I could walk with or even behind them. Instead, after I closed the door and sent the driver on his way, I was ushered to a side path. I was, as always, thankful for the burst of speed skill, because other maids probably had to run for this next part. Instead, I easily overtook the Felius duo and reached the servants' entrance before they made it to the main doors. I informed the herald of the names and titles of Lord Felius and Cat so that he could announce them as they entered. After that, I entered the gigantic ballroom, seeing the explosion of color and culture that was the Duke's court. It was a breathtaking and stunning display of wealth and beauty, again lit by magical lights with servants in livery serving delicacies from silver platters to the elegant nobles. Not long afterwards, the herald announced their entrance. Announcing his lordship Baron Felius and announcing and introducing the former noble, now Lady Catherine Felius in her debut to the court, his daughter. The herald's voice was clear across the entire ballroom, and if everything had gone correctly, that announcement had triggered Cat's class evolution. I would have to ask afterwards, because I probably would not talk to her until the party was over. While I do wish I could have joined the ball, I would be instead off to the side and against the wall throughout the entire event. The Duke's servants would be handling the service tonight and I was mostly here as a prop. Mostly, because as a battle maid I was supposed to keep my eyes open for physical dangers to my employer. Although, that was honestly pretty much pointless. The Duke's security was likely far better than I could provide, but it never hurt to be prepared I suppose. Funnily enough, after a while I found that even a magical fantasy ball filled with intrigue and the possible chance for assassination could be pretty boring if your only interaction with it was looking at it from the side. I watched as Cat met a whirlwind of nobles and noticed she was catching eyes from all over the room. There was a certain amount of pride in that, considering the effort I had put into her looks for the night. There were introductions, then dances, then drinks and more introductions, before more dances. She accepted almost every dance, with only a few declined for political reasons. House Felius's relative neutrality was quite a burden for her to maintain. I was pretty sure Cat didn't have any stamina skills, and I doubted that she had gained any with the lady class, so it was doubly impressive that neither her posture or smile slipped the whole night. Towards the end, the ball broke up into smaller groups in the side rooms where the fun of the ball turned more towards intrigue and backroom deals. This would be Cat's greatest challenge, as her father ran in different circles than she would as a young lady, and for the next 2 hours she would have to navigate these waters herself. Muffling enchantments in the room meant that I was not able to hear the conversations despite the relatively high perception I had after I had gained class levels. Tonight, as it was her debut, all she had to do was smile and politely decline to participate in most of the intrigue around her. Lord Felius had certainly given her some goals to accomplish, but the ultimate goal for the night was merely for her to be introduced to the court without scandal. It didn't look like that would be easy though, as a young lord was being rather persistent. A tall, dark-haired and dark-eyed lord whose style and fashion left something to be desired. He certainly had fine clothes, but they were wrinkled in a mess and his hair is a mess too. Worse, he was important enough that I had been taught to recognize him through his portrait. Lord Charlian Markule was the grandnephew of the Duke, and because the Duke wasn't a Duke but a Prince, the Duke's father had been the brother of the previous king. That meant that despite being a non-inheriting member of a branch family of the royal family, he still had royal blood. The whole thing was complex, but the short version is that Charlian's father was a count who was deeply envious of his uncle and the class of prince and wasn't afraid to use his family's connections to crush who he didn't like. Politically, socially, and probably even personally, Cat had no desire or reason to mix with someone like him. His branch of the family was too entrenched in the noble faction to allow House Felius to maintain its careful neutrality. Charlian should know that, and yet there he was obviously pressuring Cat to drink. Unfortunately, Milady, I said as I gently took the wine glass from her, having used burst of speed to appear by her. This cup appears to be tainted, and I could never allow a young lady like yourself drink from it. Please, allow me to get you another. That would be acceptable, Honora, Catherine said without a blink, despite Charlian nearly jumping out of his skin when I suddenly appeared beside her. A red this time please, properly watered as I still have a long night ahead of me. Of course, my lady, I bow slightly as Charlian sputters and glares at me, and then I am beside one of the guards, who jumps even more than Charlian did. Honestly, making people jump will never stop being funny, but I have a job to do. This cup is poisoned, I show the wine glass to the guard. When he takes it, I am gone again before he can ask anything, getting a new glass for Catherine. I deliver it and am back at the guard a second later. I will be informing Baron Felius of this. I was led to expect that I could expect more from the security around this event. I am glaring at the guard while keeping Cat visible in the corner of my eye. This really was unexpected, although given the nature of the court, it might have just been a test to see if Cat had poison resistance. Merely a formality almost, a trial that the nobility go through, but I wasn't about to believe that. I will inform my superior. The guard withered under my glare, which made me frown. You do that, I said, eyeing him carefully. Now, preferably. Stuttering, the guard quickly left, which convinced me, even more than the poison did, that something was wrong. A maid intimidating a guard. I didn't believe it. I didn't have any intimidation skills, and one would expect a guard to have skills countering fear. On the other hand, it wasn't uncommon for Lord S and Lady S to have skills that allow them to see classes, so the man probably was a guard. Unless most of the nobility were in on whatever plan this was, or a mage had used magic to hide their class. The night was nearly over though, so I could only hope that I was just being paranoid and that nothing more would happen. I wasn't able to convince myself of that, considering I had just prevented a poisoning barely a few minutes ago. Chapter 8 turns out that I was utterly wrong. The rest of Cat's debut went swimmingly, with even Lord Charlie failing to be enough of a pest for me to justify stabbing him. We had left a little before midnight, with the same driver. I double-checked, taking the carriage back to House Felius. I was almost considering writing the whole thing off as some kind of bizarre mistake when my danger sense started to tingle. The street was dark, but the shadows moved. Of course, shadows don't move by themselves, and it didn't take a genius to figure out that this was an ambush. More fools them, in that case, because Lord Felius's bodyguard hadn't been allowed into the palace and was back with us now. Probably. I have never actually seen his bodyguard after all, and I was very envious of whatever skill it was that prevented me from noticing him. What I did know was that the bodyguard was the last line of defense, relying as much on stealth and surprise as on strength for victory. Which meant that I would be engaging the ambushers first. "It looks like we have some unfriendly folk up ahead," I said as casually as possible to the driver. "I might have to stop to talk to them for a bit, so you just keep driving." "Yeah." He went from relaxed, if tired looking, to wary, to frightened, and stiffly nodded back. I started checking my knives and trying to prepare myself. This would be my first real fight since I fought my kidnapper all those years ago, that bastard. I actually had the oddest feeling that I would see him again soon. If I did, I would be sure to knife him. This world, any world, didn't need the kind of people who would grab kids off the street. The fight started with a crossbow bolt from the shadows, aimed at the horse pulling the carriage. I moved, appearing on the horse's back. Parry, I used the skill, deflecting the bolt with a knife. The force knocked me off the horse, but I had expected that. I used the fall to disappear behind the horse and ran around the back of the carriage in an attempt to flank the crossbowman. I could see him reloading now, and I wanted to run up and stab him, but my danger sense was flaring. So I palmed one of my knives and threw it. I knew that it wouldn't be lethal, but he wouldn't be using that arm, and it meant no more crossbow bolts. My danger sense screamed, and I barely dodged one, slashed and blocked another before getting punched in the face. I tried to use burst of speed to gain some distance, but the attacker kept up with me. And there was another one as well, also keeping up with me. Burst of speed and skills like it were very rare, very powerful, and usually very limited. My skill synergies helped me offset this, and it might be the same for them, but it was more likely that they were considerably high level. I was only level 9. I can't run, so I am going to have to dodge. Left, low, high, left, right. Their strikes were a blur and I wasn't fast enough. I was getting cut. Not deeply, but it was happening. They covered each other too well for me to counterattack with just burst of speed. "Give it up, girl," one of them spoke, his face hid in shadow. The shadow must be some sort of rogue ability because it seemed like they all had it. The nobles aren't worth dying for. I chuckled, taking the small break in the fight to examine myself. The wounds were shallow, I had barely been hurt yet. I gave my ambushers a smile, and spoke with confidence. "I'll turn it back on you." I gave them a somewhat feral smile. "Go away and I won't actually start to try. You have no chance against me." Bluffing. I would say you need to work on that skill, girl, but you won't be living long enough to do so. They advanced again and I raised my knives. Living in a world with a system is rather surreal and confusing, I have to say. Aside from the strangeness of stats and classes, skills in particular were odd. Even a simple skill like expert cleaning had a ton of questions that had to be asked about it, but it seemed like the people in this world lacked the context to ask them. What exactly counts as cleaning? Spreading sand around a room to pick out rocks doesn't sound like cleaning, but would it if it was happening in a sandbox? Removing dirt sounds like cleaning, but would it work in a garden? Or on a potted plant? If there are a bunch of toys on the floor, does kicking them under a bed activate the skill? How would expert cleaning apply in such a situation, if it did activate? What about using the skill on a person? The system makes the world like a game, But even if most people play by the rules, some will exploit every loophole. Considering my life, this one, anyway, was on the line, I didn't mind showing these rogues exactly what a girl can do with a little bit of innovation. Expert cleaning and burst of speed, using my shoe to swipe dirt off of the cobblestones. This was the noble quarter, so the streets were paved, gave me the bonus of both skills, making me move several times faster than with burst of speed alone and seemed to slide along the road. Improved styling, accurate strikes, and lightning strikes, cutting into the hood and drawing a line across the man's forehead, his dodge barely preventing me from cutting out his eyes. He yelled, stumbling back as his friend moved forward to cover him. "You fucking cunt. I'll kill you." "You will try," I laughed as I slid backward. The second man followed and tried to cut off my movement by cornering me against a building, but I wasn't about to let that happen. Improved footwork, enhanced dodge, and improved acrobatics activated to allow me to run up the wall. I kicked off at an unique flip above the man's head, using improved throwing and improved styling to throw a knife into the man's neck. He didn't die immediately, but stumbled and gasped as blood began to fill his lungs. I could hear bells ringing, but all of my focus was on the last man, who had recovered enough to charge at me again. More fool him, improved makeup application, improved styling, accurate strikes, and lightning strikes put a knife through his eye. It was done. I was breathing heavily, but I wasn't tired because of work is never done. Nevertheless, the stress had me gasping for air as I became aware of my surroundings again now that the fight was over. There were bells ringing, and as I looked up, I saw that the buildings were casting shadows from glowing lights behind them. Improved footwork and burst of speed allowed me to run up the side of the building, and on the roof I saw that the city was on fire in many places. What the hell is going on? I muttered to myself and then started running back to House Felius, praying that my brother was okay in whatever mess was going on. Mother and father should be safe in the Felius manor, but my brother would be on the street. I sprinted through Verdun as the people woke up and the city became more chaotic. In the distance I could hear the sounds of people shouting and fighting. It almost felt like there was about to be a riot, but if there was I didn't think it was organic. Someone had planned this. I turned a corner and stopped dead. House Felius was an inferno. Outside, guards and servants were loading carriages directed by the Baron. The guards moved to stop me as I approached, but let me through as soon as they identified me. "Anne. Are you? You're hurt." Catherine rushed up to me, looking worried about the cuts on my arms. Blood had soaked into my maid outfit, but I didn't care. "I'm fine," I told her, "but what is happening? Where are my parents?" She hadn't seen them. I was supposed to stay by her, but I couldn't abandon my parents, I had to find them. There were guards here, I felt Kat would be safe, and I rushed off to find my parents. The manor looked like a vision of hell, all fire and smoke. I could barely breathe, and I hoped that my poison resistance and speed would be able to keep me alive. But it was hot, so unbelievably hot, and I could barely see in the smoke, tripping over bodies in the haze. I checked everyone, but none of them were my parents, so I could hope that they were still alive. I could hope until I found them together, dead from the smoke in an upper room. I don't remember carrying them outside, I just remember Catherine hugging me as I wailed and cried on the grounds of the manor, my parents dead on the grass. I didn't want to leave them, but Catherine and her guards pulled me away, bundling me into a carriage with her. She held me as we and the surviving staff of House Felius left the city. I cried and cried and cried, not even noticing as my class upgraded. I wouldn't notice until morning, and I would hardly care for a while yet afterwards. You have reached level 10. Congratulations! Your class has upgraded. You are now Ninja Maid. Your skill, Burst of Speed, has evolved into Instant Movement. Your skill, Stealth, has evolved into Unseen Servant. You have gained the ability Loyalty into Death. You have gained the skill Shadow Control. You have gained the skill Shadow Strike. you have gained the skill parkour. As an adult by the system's standards, my menu now looked like this. Character menu, name, Honora, daughter of Velvet, age, 16. Class, Ninja Maid, very rare, level, 10. Statistics, strength, 94. Endurance, 102. Vitality, 103. Agility, 130. Dexterity, 125. Perception, 101. Acuity, 101. Willpower, 92. Charisma, 112. Magic, 63. Luck, 87. Abilities. First words, Incarnator skill, hidden, better first impression, Incarnator skill, hidden, Maid's discipline, Maid skill, chemical intuition, Battle Maid skill, alchemical intuition, Battle Maid skill, loyalty unto death, Ninja Maid skill, skills, expert cleaning, elegant movements, improved styling, improved makeup application, improved gardening, work is never done, Maid sense, danger sense, weapon proficiency, short blades, menu camouflage, instant movement, unseen servant, improved laundry, instinctive etiquette, improved sewing, improved cooking, improved gardening, enhanced stamina, enhanced recovery, detect poison, parkour, enhanced dodge, improved footwork, accurate strikes, lightning strikes, counter-assassin, improved acrobatics. A very impressive menu for my age to go along with my good and stable employment that put my family and myself into a fantastic position for commoners in this world. None of this yet kept my parents alive, and it didn't help me find out if my brother had survived. In the end, I was not nearly strong enough to withstand the instability around me. Catherine was as much a friend as a mistress, and comforted me on the road north to the Felius lands. Baron Felius did not throw me out of the carriage either, and I am thankful for that. The conversation between the two of them, as well as the Baron and his knights, gave me an idea of what was going on. The royalist faction weren't idiots, and they saw that the noble faction was ascendant. Instead of letting that happen, they struck. Assassins and rogues infiltrated Verdun first, and while they struck, noble faction forces moved to attack the city, accusing the Duke of treason to the crown. Except they had not brought nearly enough forces, and the Duke had survived to begin rallying his forces. Since the Duke was a prince, he had declared himself the rightful king in response, and now the country was spiraling towards civil war. No, it was in a civil war. Of course, House Felius had been neutral in the struggle between the royalists and the noble faction, but it turns out that the royalists didn't see it that way. Failing to openly support the royalists was treason in their eyes, even if the house treated the noble faction the same way. So they had attacked House Felius as well, and pushed the house firmly into the arms of the noble faction. The Baron was heading to his territory, the coastal city of Calais. There he would rally his forces to join the prince, and he would go off to battle. Catherine, and therefore myself, would remain in the city. There was a part of me that wanted to rush off to battle for revenge, but I would never really get it, would I? The men who started the fires either had been killed by someone else, or had escaped, and I would likely never find them. The people who had ordered the fires to be set were too far above my station for me to touch in a feudal society. Additionally, while it was true that I had a powerful class and skills, especially when I combined my skills together, there would be career soldiers on the battlefield among the levies and conscripts. I might be able to cut down any number of conscripts or common rogues, but there were true elites out there. Knight champions and veteran commanders and farsight snipers, any of which could cut down a maid of any kind in a second. So after the carriage arrived in Calais, I remained behind with Catherine, working as a maid and bodyguard for her, and I have to admit that I was right to do so. Assassins and criminals crawled out of the woodwork to cause trouble. Every week, a saboteur of some kind would try something in the city, which had become an important port for the prince's forces' supply lines. On the docks, using parkour and instant movement to run up the side of a ship and jumping onto the deck with knives being thrown before my feet even touched down on the wood. I had run all the way from Castle Felius, not as far as you would think. The castle was just above and overlooking the harbor, when I had seen the torches. Calais was under curfew and the guards were given lanterns. Torches meant criminals or fools. Later, I am sure I would regret my actions if I killed some fool instead of an actual criminal or spy of some kind, but so far I had only run into saboteurs and spies. This was no different. The ship's deck had been stacked with brush and kindling. I could smell oil as well. By sacrificing a large amount of my stamina, I was able to use instant movement as a short teleport instead of a speed enhancement, allowing me to catch the torch before it hit the oil-soaked deck. I tossed it overboard, the shadows flickering wildly as the torch spun into the air. The group I had interrupted howled and attacked me and then found those flickering shadows had teeth. Shadow control and shadow strike. Until the torch dipped below the deck, my shadow fought with me, keeping my foes off their guard. I struck with cold fury and without mercy. Letting this new feeling of icy hate out on this world, I fought on as the Civil War intensified. Chapter 9 Civil Wars are naturally horrible. With all of the normal pain of war mixed with the worst of family fighting and all of it taking place on home soil. No matter who wins, everyone suffers. But this world of classes and skills exacerbates this. I had always found stealth in games to be amusing. A half-human, half-robot, cyborg hiding behind a barrel barely big enough for him to crouch behind? Yeah, anyone would spot something that out of place in a second. And if a security guard sees a crouchy man running around, they aren't going to wander over dumbly to allow you to knock them out. No, they would probably radio their boss and then carefully check. Even if you knocked them out then, the game would be up because they would know you were there when the guard doesn't call in again. And I often wondered how much people had really thought about how noisy choking someone out would be. Not that I ever had the chance to try it, but I don't need to actually do something to realize it wouldn't work in reality. But the system makes a mockery of reality. Low-level rogues were hardly an issue, but higher-level spies and saboteurs were far more tricky. A high-level saboteur who had evolved into an arsonist could use flint and steel in a random corner of a building and have an entire city block in flames within 5 minutes. A high-level spy might be literally invisible, or worse, unnoticeable. Calais was the only port in rebel hands, and it was an important point in the rebel supply lines. In fact, as winter had set in, it had become the most important part of those supply lines. Which brought it, and House Felius, into the crosshairs of the royalists. A high-level assassin after Cat might only give me a second or two to intercept them before they strike, their skills masking their approach until they are in position. Or they might be far away with a bow arrow, with only the slight whisper of the arrow as a warning. Or maybe they're only there to distract the guards and myself while their compatriots burn down a granary or pillage a warehouse. It was unending, and I was exhausted. I was kept moving out of anger for what had happened to my family, fear for what might happen to Cat, and pure determination to do my job. It was a frigid day, with a blizzard buffeting the city, when our paths crossed again. I had been tipped off to a ring of traitors in the city, and I planned to crash it with the guards at my back. I was through the second-floor window of the warehouse and into the rafters without making a sound, moving quickly towards the circle of shadowy figures talking in hushed voices. I strained my ears, trying to listen in. We'd try to take some of them prisoner and interrogate them, but I might learn something more or faster if I listen. Except, I immediately became distracted. One of the voices seemed familiar. The guards smashed in the doors, and the figures immediately turned to face them. I dropped down in the confusion, planning to take advantage to take down as many as I could from behind. Instant movement allowed me to touch down on the floor in an instant, and I immediately moved to strike, lunging forward towards the back of one of the men. Only to be intercepted. My knife struck against the blade of one of the cloaked men who had moved to cover his ally. With a scowl, I moved, attempting to overwhelm him with speed, and he matched me, even when I began to combine my skills. He must be high level. You. Girl, his voice was familiar, but I couldn't place it. You seem quite familiar. Do I know you from somewhere? You sound familiar to me as well, I answer, hoping that the guards will kill and scatter the others while I distract the high-level enemy. Perhaps we have met, although I generally remember the rogues I run into. As fun as it might be for us to sit here until we remember each other, you have been a real thorn in our side for some time. He shifted his weight and tightened his grip on his short sword. And it occurs to me that if you are here, you aren't with the Lady Catherine Felius. Don't you dare, I started, but he blurred away. I swore and pursued. Cat had other guards and bodyguards, but it was true that I was her best. My level was relatively high, and the quality of my class allowed me to fight above my level, especially when I combined my skills. And of course, I never fought fair, always fighting with guards and soldiers at my side. Now I was sprinting through the city, just barely behind what I was assuming to be a high-level assassin. When he turned a corner and I followed, I had almost no time to react when he had suddenly turned around and attacked. I blocked the blade, but the force threw me into a wall and he slammed me into it again before I could dodge. I was straining to prevent his blade from my stomach, my hand on his wrist. I remember who you are now. He didn't sound like our scuffle was taking him much effort, instead he sounded delighted. It has been more than a decade since we last met. His face was covered by shadow and darkness, but the tilt of his hood made me think he was looking me up and down as he chuckled. You sure grew up nicely. Of course, that hint was all I needed to remember my kidnapper. Was he this strong a decade ago? No, of course he leveled in the meantime, but this is my chance to get rid of him for good. I found myself showing my teeth in some combination of smiling and snarling. I am going to kill you, I spat out. If you give up I'll make it quick. That was a lie. He deserved to die, and after the death of my parents and months of attacks on my best friend, I didn't have a lot of kindness left in me. Just fury and hate. Ha ha, like I am going to do that. Let's see if you can catch me first. He slugged me across the face and then sped off again. I staggered and ran after him. He was still heading towards House Felius. We ran and he began to pull away. He was faster than I was. But I wasn't about to let him hurt her, and I had more tricks up my sleeve. I spammed instant movement, the stamina drain hitting me like a truck as I used it to teleport in short leaps one after the other. Each place I touched, I used expert cleaning and work is never done to regain just the slightest bit of energy. With how exhausting this is, I will only have one chance. I catch up and he turns on a dime, charging at me. It surprises me, but it doesn't matter, as I focus my instant movement into my hand. I had spent hours doing handstands and handworking just to trick my skill to work in a moment like this. My knife teleported out of my hand and into his eye, giving him only a fraction of a second to show his surprise. Our momentum carries us forward into crashing together, and his larger mass throws me backwards as something sharp cuts through my stomach. We both hit the ground, and my kidnapper doesn't move again. He is dead. I, on the other hand, find myself once again on the ground, bleeding out on the street. It was hard to breathe, but I didn't want to die yet. I at least wanted to say goodbye to Cat, but the winter cold seeped in and I was so tired. I closed my eyes. Asterisk. I opened my eyes again, seeing a smooth white ceiling. A mix of emotions flooded me then. Anger, satisfaction, sadness, and relief. I had gotten my revenge on that bastard, and unlike me he probably wasn't coming back. However, I would never see Cat again. I had a life that seemed okay, and then it all went up in smoke and I would never get a chance to put it back together again. And relief, because even though I died, I didn't end. I had returned to this room, where I curled up on the marble slab and cried. I don't know how long I cried, but I eventually stopped. There was something about this place, I think. Something that suppressed my emotions. It didn't get rid of them, but merely reduced them until I was functional. I was angry about that. Angry that I couldn't even properly grieve, but I wasn't able to get very mad over it. Instead, I got up and read the box in front of me. Welcome back, Cadence Lee, and congratulations on completing your second life. You know, saying welcome in this situation is kind of disgusting. I said, hating this feeling of being on the edge of overwhelming grief but being unable to be as sad as I should be. In fact, saying welcome when being in this room means I died. Would it matter how I died? Welcome is probably inappropriate under almost all circumstances. Please step up to the podium and have your life be measured. I walked up to the podium saying, hello again, Pody. Even if this room is making me feel strange, I am slightly glad to see you again. Even if I am just anthropomorphizing a stone. I place my palm in the silver outline of a hand on top of the podium. Calculating your life accomplishments. You survived 16 years. For surviving 16 years you have earned 16 points. You took part in being professionally trained in a trade. For going through 8 years of professional training, you have earned 2 points. You defeated multiple enemies. For killing 26 humans, you have gained 26 points. You defeated multiple enemies above your level. For killing 7 humans above your level, you have earned 14 points. You gained 2 classes. For gaining 2 classes you have earned 2 points. You gained 2 advanced classes. For gaining 2 advanced classes you have earned 4 points. You gained 14 levels. For gaining 14 levels you have gained 14 points. You have learned 27 skills. For learning 27 skills you have earned 27 points. Your point total for this life is 105. Your grade for this life is F. For obtaining a grade of F, you have received a strike. If you obtain 3 strikes you will no longer be reincarnated. You have beginner's protection. 1 strike removed. Your beginner's protection will last 2 more lives. Yeah, I feel like I failed too. There must have been something else I could have done. I hope Cat will be okay, and I never did find out if my brother survived. What could I have done better? Does it even matter? I can never go back. Congratulations, Incarnator. You have earned multiple achievements. For killing a sapient who killed you, you have earned the achievement I'm taking you with me and earned 4 points. You have unlocked additional options in the Defense tab. For killing a sapient for the first time, you have earned the achievement Killer and earned 1 point. You have unlocked the Attack tab in the store. For killing a sapient much stronger than you for the first time, you have earned the achievement Giant Killer and earned 2 points. You have unlocked additional options in the Attack tab. For killing 10 sapients for the first time, you have earned the achievement Bloody Hands and earned 2 points. You have unlocked additional options in the Attack tab. For earning a class for the first time, you have earned the achievement Classy and earned 1 point. Option unlocked prevented until additional prerequisites are met. For earning an advanced class for the first time, you have earned the achievement Extra Classy and earned 2 points. Option unlocked prevented until additional prerequisites are met. For learning how to perform basic cleaning professionally for the first time, you have earned the achievement Spit Shine and earned 1 point. You have unlocked additional options in the General tab. For learning how to use knives at a basic level for the first time, you have earned the achievement Stabby and earned 1 point. You have unlocked additional options in the Attack tab. For being kidnapped for the first time, you have earned the achievement Grabbed and earned 1 point. You have unlocked additional options in the Defense tab. For living a life without any sexual interaction, you have earned the achievement Celibate and earned 1 point. You have unlocked additional options in the Communications tab. Calculating achievement total. Your points earned from achievements is 16 points. Recalculating your life accomplishments. Your point total is 121 points. Your grade for this life is F. For obtaining a grade of F you have not earned a bonus. I have noticed that while my emotions are somewhat suppressed right now, it doesn't seem like any of my emotions are added to. So while I am not too sad to move right now, I can't bring myself to care about what I am seeing. I suppose I had done better before achievements, if that matters, but as a commoner I didn't really have nearly as many opportunities as Honora as I had in my first life. Would you like to access the Incarnator menu now? Sure, Pody, I sigh. I just want to get this over with. At least I will be able to feel my emotions when I leave. Incarnator menu, points balance, 128. Stats, strength, 0 plus endurance, 0 plus vitality, 6 plus agility, 0 plus dexterity, 0 plus perception, 0 plus acuity, 6 plus willpower, 0 plus charisma, 7 plus magic, 0 plus luck, 0 plus ability menu, attack, arts, communications, defense, general, intelligence, magic, relationships, vitals, records, life records, ability list, achievement list. Just show me the new ones, Pody. I don't want to bother with the whole list. Attack Abilities tab, Killing Blow. When attacking a sapient with intent to kill, you have 5% increased strength and agility. 50 points. Fast Hands, Knives. When using knives, your agility, dexterity, and acuity are increased by 15%. 200 points. Rise to the Challenge. When fighting an opponent stronger than you, any stat below your opponent's can increase up to 10%. The amount of the increase is dependent on the difference in power between you and your opponent. This skill cannot raise a stat above your opponent's. 250 points. Communications Abilities tab, Purity. So long as you do not engage in a sexual act, you are more resistant to poison and disease. 100 points. Defense Abilities tab, Dead Weight. When resisting a kidnapping attempt, your weight feels double to your kidnapper and you are harder to hold on to. 100 points. Death Curse. If you are killed, this ability permanently reduces your killer's luck by 100. 1000 points. General Abilities tab, Fast Hands. Cleaning. When cleaning, your strength, endurance, agility, and dexterity are increased by 10%. 150 points. Honestly, I just can't care, Pody. Just divide up my points evenly across all of my stats. I sound listless, maybe depressed. I'd like to sleep, but I don't think I can hear. And just throw the extra into strength, why not? My points went down to 8 and all my stats went up by 1. So I had 8 charisma, 7 vitality and acuity, as well as 2 in strength and 1 in all the rest. Get me out of here, Pody. I just can't be here right now. Beginning reincarnation. You currently are only allowed to reincarnate into worlds with a system. World found. May your life be glorious. Incarnator Tobe continued. Thanks for listening.